Okay, KM6LYW radio viewers. It's Friday. We got another video. Hey, let's talk about Raspberry Pi OS. There's a new one, version 11. And maybe we can talk about Digipi development a little bit. It's running on 11, unbelievably. Before we begin, I've got to thank the November guys. November guys, we're only at the 9th. These are patrons for November. Honestly, there are so many patrons. The support is so overwhelming that I don't have a complete list. What I can tell you is if you do have access to the Digipi image, that's this little Raspberry Pi down there that you see, there is an Easter egg on there, which may or may not have all of the names who made the Digipi possible. So there's an Easter egg in the current image of the Digipi. Don't tell everyone where it is or what it's about. Just, I don't know, send me an email if you find it, okay? There's an Easter egg there, and I gave all of you guys credit for the Digipi because you really made that possible. What is the Digipi? It is basically a data hotspot for your amateur radio. So all data modes. All you need is a web browser or a tablet or a cell phone, and you can access the Digipi. You don't need to know any Linux or programming or shell scripts. Just plug it into your HF radio, whether it's USB or maybe an old push-to-talk rig. You can set that up. The Digipi instructions are out at Krager.org if you want to build one of these, /Digipi. And there it is. I can actually zoom that in. So this is a data hotspot for your amateur radio. So we're not here to talk about Digipi today. We're here to talk about the fact that there is a new Raspberry Pi operating system out there. It's called Raspberry Pi OS, for lack of a better name. Version 11 is also known as Bullseye. So this Raspberry Pi OS is based largely on the Debian GNU Linux distribution, and that in recent months it went from Buster to Bullseye, which means from 10 to 11. These are Toy Story characters, by the way. That's why I keep saying Buster and Bullseye and Jesse. Toy Story characters. So Raspberry Pi OS, based on Debian, is now on Bullseye, or what you might call Raspberry Pi 11. Now you can get it down at raspberrypi.com/software. And for the Digipi, we're not doing a full-blown desktop. We're actually just doing what they call the light or tiny. I'm trying to find it right now. There's like other downloads. Let's see if I can find it here. Raspberry Pi OS software. I don't want for Ubuntu. What is that, like the burner? See all download options. This is what we want. So like for a Raspberry Pi that's headless, like the Digipi, no monitor, no keyboard, what we want is a Raspberry Pi OS Lite. And that's really simple. Now you can upgrade from 10 to 11. Let's say you're just running a Raspberry Pi. I'm going to upgrade the Digipi for you guys. You guys don't have to do this, but maybe I'll show you how in case the intrepid few want to go through that process. It's not clear whether or not the Raspberry Pi can be upgraded from 10 to 11 using standard Debian stuff. See, it's like Debian operating system, and then there's Raspberry Pi packages sprinkled in on top of that. In fact, there's 2 locations where we get software. So we can try that. I'll go over it a little bit here, but ideally you want to do a clean install of any operating system, really, not just Raspberry Pi or Linux. But there is a process to update it, which may or may not be supported by the Raspberry Pi folks. So new features, why would you want to do this? So all of the applications are newer. We've got and my light just quit. We've got a newer version of like WSJTX, slow scan television, JS8 calls at the latest version, I noticed. Yeah, this light isn't going to work under any circumstance. What else? The latest version of Direwolf, I'll put that in. And of course, I compile most of this stuff into the Digipi image, but that's why we would want to upgrade is the latest version of those applications. And plus, we get security patches and other goodies. All right, so Raspberry Pi OS is now on version 11. That's the deal. Let's say you've got a Raspberry Pi and you want to update it. There's a couple of things you want to do. Sudo root. I'm going to do sudo remount because the Digipi is read-only file system. It's like an appliance. And I'm going to remount the file system read-write. This is a Digipi intrinsic. And then you want to vi etc apt sources.list, all right? And in the very first line, you're going to see Buster right here, all right? And I want you to change Buster to Bullseye, all right? And do that there. And then for Debian, that's all you do. But for Raspberry Pi OS, there's an additional file. And most of the how-tos out there do not tell you about this one. And this one's critical for Raspberry Pi. It has all the Raspberry Pi stuff in it, particularly firmware. Like, so the Debian code or social contract doesn't allow proprietary software, or source code isn't available for everything. So like, like the Bluetooth firmware, I think even the Wi-Fi firmware, that's been proprietary, and Debian, which simply refused to ship it. For the Broadcom chip, I do think we're using new drivers now that are open source, but I don't think that's been reflected in the Debian. Someone can correct me there. But the other file you want to edit before you do an upgrade is raspi.list. Okay, and that's an etc apt sources.list.d. And we're going to do the exact same thing. Wherever we see Buster on the first line, I want you to change it to Bullseye. And I really hope you guys can see this. Yeah, I'm not blowing you guys away here. Let me make this window a little smaller. Get it under my face here. Let's keep going. All right. Oh, that'll have to do. Bulls, and I'll spell it correctly too. All right. So there's two files you want to edit. All right. And so now that those two files are edited, you want to do a full apt get update. And this will pull down all of the indexes for any new packages that might be at those two sources that we just edited. You're not going to see anything special. If you see an error, obviously you got something wonky. And then 86%. I need better internet. And okay, now we have the new indexes. Now we want to do apt get dist upgrade. All right, and that line wrap just a little bit. You can do apt get -y dist upgrade. That'll answer yes to all your questions. If you've got a highly modified system and you modified a bunch of config files, don't put the Y in there. So just apt get dist upgrade, and it will ask you for certain things. Like if you modified a config file, do you want to use your copy of the config file, or do you want to use the package owner's config file? So in this case, I've already upgraded everything. In your case, there'd be a bunch of packages that need to be uploaded, and there's a lot. In fact, there's so many, I think it actually blows up the disk on this. If you want to make your root volume larger, or maybe mount var cache apt archives on like a fourth partition on the Digipi. If you're on a regular, I think you can use the Raspberry Pi tools to extend the root partition out to the end of your SD card. But I think by default, the file system's too small to do an upgrade because you have to download all the packages and then install them. In fact, I think there was a net loss of space in the end. We actually saved 40 megs by upgrading, which is pretty cool. In my case, I've already blown out the root file system. I have about a gigabyte available, so this will work. So Digipi version 1.6, which is what you're looking at, will have a larger root file system and give you a little more breathing space for this kind of stuff. The other thing was an etc systemd. This was an actual bug. I remember it's not guaranteed to work, so back up your image first. System, there was something. It was a cddhcp. I know I'm not reading this out loud. Wait.conf. So an etc systemd system in /dhcpd.service.d. There's a file called wait.conf. I want you to edit that because this was wrong. In fact, Wi-Fi did not come up. So after your upgrade, make this change. Comment out this line because this command does not exist in a Debian 11, and then change it to this line, and then Wi-Fi will work perfectly. I haven't found any other problems other than Wi-Fi failing at first start. Also, one other trick, if you've got a new image or your Raspberry Pi person, go into boot, and there's a cool file here where you can change tons of stuff. Just config.txt /boot/config.txt. We make some changes here for the Digipi, mostly to switch between the FEPi audio board, which is this guy, and the audio injector. So comment out one or the other, but not both, and don't have both uncommented either, depending on which audio card you might have installed on your Digipi here. Now this one doesn't have an audio board installed because it's using USB on this particular radio. At the very end here, remember that this is a Raspberry Pi Zero version 2, by the way, which is awesome, has 4 cores. That has very limited memory, 512 megs of memory. And what we can do is see that the GPU, the graphics processor, and the CPU actually share the same memory pool. And since this is headless, the GPU doesn't need all that memory. I think it's over 100 megabytes, 128 megs of memory that it uses, which is useless in a headless situation like we have here with the Digipi. So in that case, I want you to put startx underscore x equals 0 and GPU underscore mem equals 16 in this what is this file name? Config.txt in the /boot directory. Make those two changes and you will increase your memory footprint by about 20%. So if sometimes you're compiling something and you just don't have enough memory and maybe got to have a swap file, you really don't want to use a swap file unless you absolutely have to. So this will buy you an extra 20% of RAM if you've got memory pressure, which most people do on a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is what we're looking at here, which works perfectly for our needs because we are not using a desktop environment. We don't have web browsers and file managers and all that. Speaking of which, if you have a Raspberry Pi 4 upgrading to Debian 11, you'll see a CPU frequency increase. Um, if you have a modern Raspberry Pi 4, I don't remember the actual designation on the CPU, but I think you can get up to 1.6 gigahertz if you have a modern Raspberry Pi 4. Old Pi 4s won't see that boost. This Digipi here, this Raspberry Pi Zero is going to be running at 1 gigahertz when it's running flat out and it'll throttle. I set the Digipi to be on demand in this version. Otherwise, it's in power save mode by default and you're only at 700 megahertz. So consider changing the Linux CPU frequency uh, scheduler or scaler, I should say. What else was interesting about this? So the applications, the whole reason we do this. So the Digipi has this web interface that you can access via web browser or your tablet or your cell phone. And right now it is a TNC or iGate for APRS. I can actually connect to it over Bluetooth and send packets and stuff. There, I just sent a packet with my cell phone over APRS. That was over Bluetooth. Bluetooth wasn't working initially, but again, because we didn't have the updated stuff from the Raspberry Pi folks, the firmware for the Bluetooth thing wasn't loaded, but it is now. Everything seems to be working swimmingly. So that was APRS. Just so you can take a look at some of the newer apps that are here. We've got JS8 Call, which is going to be brand new. That wasn't in the original Digipi image, mostly because of CPU constraints. But now that we have the Raspberry Pi Zero version 2, we can run that just fine. So let me start up a WSJTX. This is going to be for FT8. And I should probably get it out of memory mode. Oh, we'll go into VFO mode. VFO. Let's switch this over to the HF antenna. That's my only gripe about the 705 is there's only one antenna jack. So when we want to switch between VHF and HF, we got to plug in a different antenna. You might notice that your HF antenna actually has a pretty good SWR on VHF. Mine did. It's about 1.5 to 1. I've used it accidentally a few times. The pattern sucks, but hey, it works. All right, anyways, back to FT8. We're going to take a look at that. Again, everything runs in a web browser here on the Digipi. I'm going to turn on monitoring. We need to go to, actually, we can let this do the cat control. So we want to be 14074. And we're hearing FT8 noises. I don't know if you can hear them. That's annoying. So the takeaway, you've all seen FT8. The takeaway here is that this FT8 is now 230, which is a fairly new. It's not the newest, but it's fairly new. Ooh, I was gonna call that guy, but he's DX. Let me see the next thing here. I always end up operating these radios rather than doing a video. So, anyways, I don't know. Let's how about this guy, N6YTH. We are going to enable the transmitter, see if we can call him. One of these times, I'm going to get a contact on FT8 in these videos, and I'm not going to waste your time. It's just going to work first shot. Turn the power up. Someone might be talking to him already. No, transmitter's still enabled. Anyways, I don't want to kill all of your time here. Okay, we're transmitting. All right, I'm at full power. Maybe you guys can tell me. On the 705, I'm new to 705s. Do I go full power here in data mode? Because I'm like at 100%, which is 10 watts, but I always feel like I'm burning it up. Am I burning it up? I'm gonna turn it down to like 80% and split the difference. I don't know. Does it get hot? Tell me if you run your FT8 stuff at full blast on the 705. That would be interesting to me. Because man, it's otherwise you're really only at 5 watts. Hey, we got a contact finally. I'm +2 with November 6 Yankee India Hotel. And of course, I'm responding to him. And all of this is on the Digipi at the 705. In fact, my antenna isn't even tight. It's kind of windy out there, so I loosened it up pretty good. So yeah, we made a contact on FT8 in one of these videos, finally. It's 15 seconds per frame, right? So it's kind of like watching paint dry here. I don't know. I could probably zoom this in a little bit. All right, he's saying 73, and there's the contact. All right, we got contact on FT8 using the 705, using Digipi version 1.6. In fact, it's not released yet. This is the prototype, so this is version 1.6. So FT8 obviously works. We just made a contact. Let's take a look at JS8 call. This is brand new in 1.6. Again, not released just yet. Um, but we'll see what version this is. Again, this is all on Raspberry Pi OS 11 running the Digipi software. It's actually working. For a while there, I was a little skeptical. I was thinking, man, we're gonna have to stick to Debian 10 until this gets straightened out. Let me close that window. All right, let's click on JS8 call down here. And JS8 call is actually running version 2.2.1, which is cool. Um, I don't know if I'm going to send I'll just send my status here. I don't want to let people down. Might as well operate these things while we've got them up. So version 2.2.1 and JS8 call, and we are running in, I don't know, I do 3 decode passes, which is more than enough. This Raspberry Pi Zero version 2 is just fantastic. The decoder works just fine. So that is sending right now, transmitting each frame, sending my status. What else might be interesting in here? A lot of people are having trouble, setting up radios so for FTA and JS8 call, you're going to want to use Hamlib. The new version of Hamlib that comes with Debian or Raspberry Pi OS 11 works with the ICOM 705 out of the box, so there's no tricks. Okay, so you want to select ICOM 705 here for cat control. You select dev TTY ACM 0. The baud rate is this. So this is how you can configure your ICOM 705. The Digipi just supports it out of the box because Hamlib supports it out of the box now that we're on Raspberry Pi OS 11. All right, so I sent my status. Now everyone knows the version of stuff that I use. Version 2.2.1. I don't know, 221-Devil. I think that was the latest one, at least at the time of this recording. That was the latest JS8 call. So that's JS8 call. It's working just fine. I accidentally closed it. There's our all-star status. Digipi/4, that's what it's called on my network. And what else is there? We can look at FLdigi real quick. Let's see what version that's on. The last time I remember messing with this, it was using rig control. I don't know if I configured FLdigi yet for the 705. Anyways, FLdigi is now started. The service is running in the virtual display, and then it's still spinning. I think we can go over to it now. I actually put some wait loops in some of these so you guys wouldn't get too anxious. But since it starts so fast now on the Raspberry Pi Zero 2, we don't need them at all. So FLdigi's on 418. I don't know, can we change how do we change the frequency in FLdigi? I mean, I might have to reach all the way over to the radio. Don't tell me FLdigi is going to make me reach all the way over to the radio to change the frequency. This is unbearable. Okay, now it's on the right frequency, 14070 for FLdigi, and this is PSK31. I don't know if there's anybody talking there. I see a little signal here. There's some railroad tracks coming down. That looks like someone just transmitting all nulls. Just 2 lines there. Not a big, oh, here's some tracks here. Not a big PSK31 day. And again, it's raining, windy, my antenna's down, kind of down. So that's FLdigi. All right, so this was kind of a combo video, guys. We talked about Raspberry Pi OS 11 is out now. So if you're a Raspberry Pi aficionado, you kind of know how to do that upgrade. Secondly, the Digipi 1.6, when it comes out, will be on version 1, Debian version 11 or Raspberry Pi OS 11. And all of these apps will be upgraded as well. So I think that answers all of our questions. Did I have anything else I was forgetting? I was trying to make sure. So I had apt-get dist upgrade. The other thing was apt auto remove to get rid of any unnecessary packages that might be laying around after an upgrade. I think I forgot that in my upgrade instructions. But remember, if you're doing the upgrade from Debian 10 to 11, if it breaks, you keep both pieces. Okay, it's kind of a sketchy process. If you have a highly modified, tweaked up system, it's even more sketchier. If you just installed Debian and didn't mess with it, or Raspberry Pi OS, yeah, this apt-get dist upgrade works pretty darn well. In my case, Wi-Fi didn't come up, but unless you're a Linux system software engineer, it might not be obvious. I had to actually plug this into a monitor. Can you believe it? Just to see why it didn't come up on Wi-Fi. And at that point, I guess it was kind of obvious. It was like a command not found thing. But anyways, there we have it. Debian 11, a Raspberry Pi OS 11, running on a Raspberry Pi Zero 2 wireless. It's a brand new Raspberry Pi. It runs the Digipi software just swimmingly well, and you just saw the versions of the software we were using. Everything works. I got a lot of testing to do here on the Digipi. Thank you, the community, for this. We've got over 80 people now working with the Digipi. Check me out on patreon.com/KM6LYW radio. That'll give you early access to software from KM6LYW radio. I appreciate it. And also like and subscribe. If you could help me out and subscribe, I'm not sure why exactly, but if you go to, I don't know where I'm at. I think we're getting close to 1,000 subscribers. So let's see, 834 subscribers. Maybe you guys can push it over the limit here. I don't know what happens at 1,000, and I don't even know why you're supposed to like and subscribe, but I think something interesting happens at 1,000. So let's see if we can do 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, I would appreciate it. Let's see what happens. Then we can really grow the community around building this Digipi. And get some more developers, get some more testing, get a larger community here. Because right now it's just kind of been me while the development's just starting to grow. But now we've got a good group of people out on groups.io/g/Digipi. Everyone's starting to answer questions as we learn how this software works, and everyone's using good operator principles not only in radio but open source software development. All right, guys, this is KM6LYW Radio, Craig in California, where it's raining, and I'm clear.